Hello and welcome back to Guitars and Music Tech. Today's episode we're going to be talking about an equalizer. What is it for? Who do you need it? Do you actually need an equalizer? Well, every hi-fi stereo system, since maybe the beginning of stereo systems, has a built-in equalizer. Usually it's just a bass and a treble, and sometimes they call it a tone. So it's just one knob where you turn it to the right, you get a little bit more trebly sound, and turn it to the left, you get a little bit more bassy sound. Or the opposite sometimes, depends. It allows you to adjust the lows and the high frequencies in the sound, and some in more elaborate standalone, you can have an equalizer which has more specific frequencies that you can control. So an equalizer is basically trying to modify the frequencies that is coming out of your system to you, because we all hear differently. That means if I like more treble, then I will just boost the treble frequencies to please myself. If I like more bass, I like to feel the thunder, then I'll push on the bass to the limit of my system before I blow up the speakers. So this is why an equalizer is there. It's just a modification of the frequency, since we all hear differently because of our ears and the way we perceive the sound. So it was a good thing to allow people, listeners, to modify the frequencies that they hear to please themselves. Most people like high frequencies, and they're very low. That's why they just put bass and treble on those hi-fi system. And you need to know that when on a lower volume, we have more difficulty hearing the low frequencies and the high frequencies. So sometimes they've added a button which is called the boost, and it does automatically when you're on lower volume. It increases automatically the treble and the bass for you, so you can hear them a little bit better at lower volume. Remember, we have an episode about all of that at the very beginning of this podcast. In the guitar world, on the other hand, an equalizer, you can find it as a pedal, and it shapes your guitar sound. It can be placed anywhere on your chain, where you can put it just after the guitar before anything else. So you are basically increasing the tone of your guitar before it goes into pedals. Or you put it after the pedals and you change also the sound that is coming out of your pedals. So for a guitar player, an equalizer pedal is kind of important, but because it changes drastically the sound. But I personally, I never had equalizer pedal. Well, maybe I didn't afford to buy one because I didn't feel like, well, maybe I wanted to have the distortion pedals and I needed to have other more important pedals to me than equalizer. And I was always able to, well, I have an equalizer on my amplifier and I have an equalizer in each of the pedals. You know, you have those tone buttons on each of those pedals. Sometimes you have both bass and treble. So I didn't really need it. But it does change the sound a lot. Today we have digital EQ, and it actually is in the form of a plugin, and it allows you also to do the same thing, but sometimes they are different from each other by a lot. Some EQs, digital EQs, we're talking about plugins, they are modeling real equalizers, analog ones, and they are selling them as such, and sometimes they're selling them at very expensive because they actually not just equalize the frequencies for you, but they add color to your sound, and that's desirable, to have the color of the electronics that those original old analog equalizers have. So that's why not two digital EQs are the same. Especially if you're recording in a DAW and the bass one that comes with the stock DAW, whatever it is, they are really more kind of for changing the sound, not to add color. So if you wanted to add color, you're going to have to purchase extra plugins that are assuming or pretending or they are emulating real analog equalizers. You may ask, how does a plugin add color? Well, basically, when you're talking about computer, it's a computer program, right? A plugin is nothing but a program. And what does it do? It gets checks. Okay, we want to boost at, let's say, 10K, all right, 10,000 hertz. And you're just pushing the button up. What does it do internally? How does that function? Basically, it's a mathematical equation which is adding numbers to the frequency, so it makes it louder. So it's just numbers added together. But when you go to a real analog EQ, there is no numbers. It's electricity, and it's going through electronics. And most of the time, those EQ are tubes. So imagine all the coloration and all the juices coming out of those electronic parts, and the tubes are adding color, adding character, adding musicality to the frequency that you are boosting. So it's completely not the same thing when you're doing it on a computer with a plugin that says equalizer and you're just putting a signal. To you would say, the effect is like, oh wow, I'm boosting this and it sounds worse. It's like hurting my ear when I boost a certain frequency. But if you had the chance to have on your hand a real analog, very expensive, let's say, equalizer, and you boost the frequency and suddenly it's like there is nothing you can do to this EQ and it sounds bad. Everything sounds beautiful. You boost here, oh, it sounds even better. You boost there, oh, it sounds even better. So how is that? It's because of all the colors that are added. And those new plugins, they are emulating that. So it's not just adding 1 + 1 = 2 at a certain frequency. It's adding harmonics. It's adding a lot of other frequencies to sweeten up. And it modifies the original sound, not just boosting it. And it blends it. And there's a lot of things going on to give this character of this plugin to emulate the original EQ. Do they do a good job? They're getting much better. Some of them are very expensive. You can pay up to $300 for, or even more, for just one EQ that you can use. So you have to use your ears and see if that's worth it. Well, the actual equalizer may cost $10,000. So you're going from $10,000 to $300, and if you can't make the difference between them, then yeah, it could be worth it, right? A lot of modern EQ can match frequency responses too. That means sometimes in the mastering phase of a song, or at the mixing phase, sometimes you would say, okay, I want my song to sound like such and such song because I like that type of music or the style of music. So what do? You look at your final sound and sometimes you put it on a graph so you can see how the frequencies are faring to each other. And then you can apply the same shape of frequencies, like how much bass you have, how much treble you have, how much mids you have, how much everything, and apply it to your own sound. Does it make your sound, it sounds like the other ones? Not really. It just gives it the same flavor, let's say. But again, it's all depending on what is this equalizer matchup doing. Is it just changing frequencies, or is it just trying to add more color to? It's a big subject there. But they exist and they are used, and there's some software that just does that automatically. You tell them, okay, I want this song. Go check the EQ for me for it, the whole frequency range for this song, and apply it to my song. And you can decide, does it make your sound like the other one, or better, worse? We don't know until you actually try it, right? you'll find endless variety of those EQs. Basically, they all do the same thing, a little bit different. So you need to shop around. There's another new type of EQ these days. Not these days. Is the dynamic EQ. Dynamic EQ is more related to like a multi-band compressor. We're going to talk about compressors in another episode. Next episode, we'll be talking about compressors. So hang around and we'll see what's up with those compressors and what do they do. So now a dynamic compressor or dynamic EQ basically is changing the frequency, but not all the time. Okay? So it is actually changing it if the frequency exists. It will cut that frequency out in a certain level. Let's stop there, not complicate our lives until we explain next week. And we'll talk about about compressors in general. But the dynamic EQ is basically many compressors with different bands. And it's a little bit more difficult to use, but it is more transparent. Because you imagine, you are turning down or boosting up a certain frequency on an EQ, and it's basically doing that all the time. That means the minute you push the button up, those frequencies are boosted throughout the song or throughout when you're playing. But imagine if it only boosts it up when you are playing. Because remember, when you're boosting a frequency of your whole song, you are boosting it for all the instruments, for everything. In the case when you're doing it on a guitar pedal, that's not a big issue because you only have a guitar, so it's not affecting anything else. So there will be no dynamic EQ benefits on a guitar. But on the music, the mix, let's say, you will find that a dynamic EQ will benefit you because it will leave everything else untouched. And the minute this frequency is too high, let's say too boomy or whatever, it will cut it down only at that particular moment. So it will, and then it will disengage. It won't affect anything but if it was a regular EQ, it will be cutting it whether there is a frequency that is booming, something that's booming or not. It will still cut it. So imagine singer is singing and you're cutting the boominess of some bass and his voice is completely destroyed because you're cutting part of his voice that is in the frequencies of what you're cutting. I don't know if you got that part, but that's how it is. Other EQs are passive and some of them are active. What does it mean? A passive EQ and an active EQ. You know, your guitar is a good example of a passive EQ. Your tone knob, basically, unless you have an active pickups. Actually, the pickups are not the active part. It's the electronics and after the pickup, that's basically a little amplifier that becomes makes the pickup active. Then you will have active tone controls, and most probably you'll have more than one. But in general, regular guitar don't put any batteries in them. These are passive. So passive, basically, they are just capacitors cutting up high frequencies and making and shaping a little bit the sound. So there are more elaborate ones that are really passive EQs, and they're a little bit more difficult to use because you really can't boost anything. All you can do is cut, and you cut frequencies at certain parts, and then at the end you might use with the compressor or whatever to boost the volume if the cutting is removing all the volume from your sound. So these are passive EQs, as I said, just like what's in your guitar. The guitar EQ, people usually never use it. The tone, like, why would you want to muff it? But sometimes you do, and try it, especially with the combination with the volume. The volume, when you turn it down a little bit, it acts as an EQ a little bit because it changes the tone that is coming out of your guitar. So in combination with the actual tone, they're all just, capacitors, basically, and resistors inside the guitar. All electronics, just capacitors and resistors, and they just basically, most of the time, just cut the high frequencies, filter it out. So That's how they shape your guitar sound. EQs also are used in some pedal effects, like the wah-wah pedal. I remember very well a wah-wah pedal because it was my first pedal ever. When I was young, I was just fascinated by electric guitar, and I was like, wow, I want to get a wah-wah pedal. And what does a wah-wah pedal do? It says just nothing. It's just a little amplifier and an equalizer that is sweeping around the whole frequency range, or a certain frequency range, and it's boosting it basically and cutting everything else, so you get the wah-wah effect. And all the wah-wah pedals are just the same thing. It's just different how much they boost, how much they cut. Again, what coloration do they add when they're boosting it? Some wah-wah pedals are piercing, they're ugly on the ear. Some are more sweet and sounding better. Also, the placement of the wah-wah pedal, because before a distortion or before a compressor or after a compressor will change drastically the effect of that wah-wah pedal. So yes, a wah-wah pedal is one of the simple uses of EQ, and some musicians, guitar players, will put the wah-wah on and put it at a certain position, basically boosting that specific frequency, and just play with it like that without really touching the wah-wah. So it's just using the wah-wah pedal as if it was just as one EQ, and they choose it by putting the pedal at a certain position. Also, there's talk boxes. A talk box is basically also kind of an EQ that changes the guitar sound, filter it with the cavity of your mouth. So basically there's a tube going into your mouth, and there's a mic picking up your filtering and applies it to, it's just kind of an EQ. It's like you're equalizing the whole guitar sound with your mouth by changing the sound, the shape of your mouth, and that's how you get this talk box. So here you have it. You have tons of different EQs. It's everywhere, especially when you're mixing your song, and you will find that it's you. When you see those big desks in a studio, you wonder, what are this? It looks complicated. It's like, I'm going to space with this thing. Well, it's nothing complicated. It's just all EQ buttons. Okay. So because the EQ, you have to choose the frequency, and then you have to choose, okay, let's say I'm on 10K. Am I just 10K, or is it a little bit before and a little bit after? So if I'm taking a little bit before and a little bit after, how much of it are you taking? That's another knob. Okay, they call it the Q knob. Okay, so you have this. You choose your frequency. Parametric EQs are called. These are called and you decide how much you want the spread around the frequency that you chose, plus how much you want to boost it or cut it. So that's basically it. So the more parametric EQs, each one of them is 3 knobs, right? So here you go. You have just, if you have like 4 parametric EQs on that mixing decks, you have already 12 buttons there. And plus the main fader, plus all the send effects, and then suddenly your mixer looks like a sea of knobs. Not complicated, believe me. So I think we discussed and we shed a little bit of light of the mystery of equalization. It's everywhere. Everything is being in a mix is being equalized, trying to give each instrument its part in the spectrum of sound spectrum. So if you have let's say that's simply a bass player playing his bass, he is not really annoying the cymbals of the drummer. The drummer is playing his crashes, and his hi-hat are a completely different highest part of this sound spectrum, let's say, and the bass is almost the lowest. So they are far, far away from each other. So why would you want to put bass on your hi-hat and boost it? It doesn't give anything. So basically you will cut all the frequencies that are below what is the main purpose of that hi-hat. And the same thing goes with the bass. You don't want to put high frequencies on your bass to So you cut them and you just leave the main frequency. So that's how also we call this masking between instruments, so they don't mask each other. But when you're getting too closer to each other, let's say a piano and a vocalist and a guitar player, they are all mostly overlapping a little bit. So you need to figure out which is the more important frequency part of each one and filter it, basically EQing it, putting an equalizer on it, and cutting all the frequencies that doesn't mask and does not disturb the instrument next to it. So when you're mixing, you listen to, let's say, your guitar. Oh, it sounds terrible. There's not enough bass. There's not enough. I don't like it. But when you listen to it in the mix with the other instrument, it's fantastic, because part of the things that is cut is being added by other instrument, and it makes the sound, the overall sound of your music much better. So here you go. So I hope we will learn something, and we'll talk next week about compressors. So see you next time. Bye bye.